Hey guys, we're back updating the power rankings for Survivor 49 following episode 9, which was another just kind of fine episode where even though there was an interesting vote out, I feel like it was pretty foreshown and through that made it not as interesting, but we'll get to it soon enough. But we have 9 people to talk about. Let's one more time. Let's go into the video. So starting off at number 9, we have the latest boot from the season, and here we have Alex. And I feel like Alex's boot was set up from pretty early on where I had already knocked Alex quite a bit for his episode last week where it felt like he was like shown being in the wrong while also being propped up as this big player, someone who is trying to play a big game here. And then this episode, we just see more of that where Rizzo's undermining him, saying that he's a big player, someone who is supposedly playing messy, and also felt like he got content setting him up for a fall where early on he had been talking about playing the middle and that was his strategy, only for Rizzo to clock that almost immediately. And while he does say later on that he needs to reverse this after figuring out that Rizzo was targeting him, I feel like by then it was a bit too late, and with the underdogs, that being Rizzo, Savannah, and Sophie B, all being set up as like these people that will overcome the odds, I feel like it was just pretty clear that Alex was going to be the big player taken out in this spot here, and I feel like that's the role that he kind of filled by the end of it. So I'm not too surprised that Alex went out in this spot. And if we're talking about Alex more generally, he was someone who I was pretty high on in the preseason, someone who I felt pretty good about, though I think when we actually saw him on the season, I wasn't really sure what to make of him, or while he was relatively high for a decent amount of the season and someone who got a decent amount of screen time, he is also someone that I very much questioned whether he would actually go on to win, and very much felt like a big player to me, someone who really talked up his like Capitol Hill experience and really made it seem like he was gonna be like this threatening player. And for him to go in that spot makes a ton of sense, where people were talking about him as this big player. And obviously I'll talk about more his actual game when we get to the player ranking, but by the end, I was pretty certain that he was probably not winning, and for him to go on this spot makes a ton of sense, but he's now out of the game to where he is here at number 9. And before we continue, I am once again partnering up with Russell Muscle TV to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles and practice them so that you can be the next challenge beast on Survivor. And with Survivor 50 just around the corner, you can purchase relics from Survivor history with my Creator Camp package, which includes the Labyrinth puzzle, the Slide puzzle, and Spencer's 5-piece puzzle from Survivor Cambodia. If all that sounds exciting to you, feel free to click the link in my description and start shopping now. And with that, we have 8 people left in the game to talk about. As usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win the game based on their edit and current game position. But at number 8, the person I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is still Christina, who I feel like all things considered had a pretty bad episode. Now, she does have a pretty good segment during the reward challenge where she came in talking about how she wants to give up her reward of
fried chicken and waffles.
Oh my God.
In order to allow Joanne to go on. And they really propped up the fact that Joanne had a bet on a reward to where it was pretty clear that someone was going to give that up. And Christina does get to talk a bit about giving up.
Say it with me. Fried chicken and waffles. Fried chicken and waffles.
For Joanne. But even then, I didn't really consider that to be that big of a positive. It felt pretty circumstantial considering that she was the one to give up the reward. It didn't really do much to propel her overall story. And I feel like aside from that, the rest of her episode is pretty bad, where she gets so much content in this episode of her just being wrong, where first up, she gets plenty of content in the tribal scene where she talks about how like she would like MC to come back, only for MC to not come back. So right away, she's shown being wrong there, and she's the one to talk about how it's a gut punch to her. But then beyond that, she gets so much focus as well talking about the Hina side's plan for the next round, where she's the one to articulate how they're going to split the vote onto Rizzo and Savannah to flush Rizzo's idol. After the immunity challenge, she talks about how they had to pivot to split the vote into Sophie B instead, how Sophie B is collateral damage for Savannah winning immunity. So the fact that Christina is the one who gets all the screen time talking about the Hina side of things over Steven, even though Steven's been a bigger character on the season, only for Christina to just be proven wrong by the end of it, where she obviously is wrong about MC surviving. And then the show makes her the face of the Hina side's plan to split the vote into Rizzo and Savannah, which ends up being unsuccessful, which makes her look even worse in my eyes from an edit perspective. So I feel like those things are pretty massive knocks to Christina's edit. And then obviously from a gameplay perspective, she's obviously not a great spot at this point. She just lost Alex, who was a number for her. And moving forward, her side is likely going to be on the outs, where the other side just has all these advantages at their disposal. And they even have a knowledge's power that they could potentially use against Christina to take her idol away. And I feel like based on the next time on Survivor segment, it does seem somewhat likely that that's going to transpire there, to where I feel like Christina is probably in a bad spot from a gameplay perspective, missing the fact that she just got undercut in the edit in this episode makes it so that I had to have her at the bottom here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have someone who I've also been pretty low on from an edit perspective, but at number 7 we do have Sophie S. And Sophie S is still not in that great of a spot where, again, I feel like her edit has been, for the most part, pretty lacking. Now, she does get a decent amount of content in this episode talking about how she recognizes she's at the bottom, how everyone was disappointed that she wasn't the one voted out to split tribal, and obviously that later sets up her flipping to the Uli side to help take out Alex there. So again, I mean, it's not entirely a bad episode from her. I mean, she does get to explain why she does eventually flip based on the fact that she feels like she's just not a priority from the Hina side. So obviously that's fine. But again, I feel like Sophie remains, for the most part, pretty underdeveloped in the edit. And while there have been some conspiracy theories online as to why that may be the case, I'm not really going to weigh in too much on that for the time being. However, I still think Sophie S, while she has been getting better content as of late, and she does seem to be doing what's seemingly right for her game, I feel like at this point it's just too little too late. She's just not having it from an edit perspective to where she is here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this person has gone down quite a bit after this last episode, but at number 6 we do have Steven, who ends up being blindsided here, where he was obviously part of this plan to try to flush Rizzo's idol, only for him to be on the outs on this vote, where he does end up losing Alex, who wasn't number for his side, and also loses Sage and Jawan, who, where in this episode he had talked about how he still has the bottom up alliance with Sage and Jawan and hopes that they're doing well, only for that to not hold true, where Sage and Jawan do break away from him to eventually take out one of his numbers, and at this point Steven does seem to be on the outs here. And admittedly, I think more of his placement here is due to his game position at this point, where I just feel more confident in the Rizzo, Savannah, Sophie B side to hold the numbers in the future, and through that, Steven will eventually be taken out there. So obviously that's not particularly great, mixing the fact that, again, he was undermined with him talking about the bottom up alliance in this episode, only for that to break apart by the end of it, was a reason why I did decide to lower Steven here, as I do feel like he's running out of runway. Though with that said, I feel like he was not as undercut as Christina, where, again, Christina was the one to talk more about what their plan was, and it just made it look worse on Christina when that plan ultimately failed. Whereas I feel like Steven was at least a little more shielded from that, where he didn't talk as much about the split vote plan and him pushing for that, where again, that was more so Christina. But either way, I'm still not feeling great about Steven's prospects at this point, to where he is here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and we have these same two players back to back here, as I feel like these players are in pretty similar game spots, and I feel like both of them are kind of around the same level edgically, but at number 5, I did decide to keep the order from last week, and here we have Jawan. And Jawan does seem to be playing the middle at this point alongside Sage, where we got plenty of content from them in this episode talking about how it was essentially their decision over whether to side with Hina or to flip over to the Uli side, where they do eventually decide to flip to the Uli side. Though with that said, I'm not entirely sure whether this was a better episode for Jawan or Sage in particular when comparing the two, as on one hand, I feel like Jawan got more screen time in this episode, where I feel like we got more Jawan's perspective and more of him weighing out the options here. Not to mention that he got some sympathetic content as well during the reward challenge, where he had been the only one to not go on a reward challenge, and after losing it, Christina offered to give him the reward of
fried chicken and waffles. Fried chicken and waffles.
Only for Jawan to be reluctant to accept it, feeling that he wanted to earn the reward, but then everyone talks him into accepting Christina's offer of
fried chicken and waffles.
They're what you want to eat.
And then afterwards, he talks about how
They're savory, they're sweet, they're what you want to eat.
rejuvenated him and how his superpowers are coming back, how the player's back. And that does lead to him being shown playing the game more. So again, I feel like there's an argument to be made that this was a good episode for him. However, on the other hand, I feel like when it came to the actual Alex plan, I feel like Jawan was shown more willing to work with Alex, how he didn't want to vote out Alex and felt like he had to flip due to Alex forcing his hand with playing too messily. Whereas I feel like Sage was shown being a bit more intentional in her decision to flip there, whereas I feel like Jawan came off more reactive. So I feel like that was a minor distinction that made me want to lower Jawan here. Then also the fact that there's still the overarching storyline of Savannah wanting to get back at Jawan, to where I feel like that is a sagging force that makes me hesitant to have Jawan too high in this power ranking. But even so, I still feel like this wasn't an entirely bad episode for him, and I feel like there are some pros to it, but I feel like it's those things that leave him behind here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we have someone who I just mentioned, but we do have Sage. And again, I feel like Sage and Jawan are kind of on a similar level here, where Sage obviously is shown being part in the middle. She is the swing vote coming to tribal, and she does eventually flip alongside Jawan to take out Alex here. Now, beyond that, she also gets an interesting confessional where she talks about wanting to target Savannah, how she compares her to a blackhead, and she can get petty too. So, again, I feel like that was a bit notable in my eyes. Though with that said, I feel like Savannah is also set up to win the war there, which again is probably not a great look for Sage overall. Though with that said, the thing that puts Sage above Jawan for me is I feel like she came off more intentional in her decision to flip against Alex, where she does talk more actively about how Alex had been playing the middle and how it makes sense to target Alex, which is different from Jawan's like more reactionary tone, where he was wanting to work with Alex only to flip when Alex like became too much of a liability there. Whereas I feel like Sage came off a bit more intentional and through that came off as a slightly better player. Though if I'm being honest, I feel like both of them are kind of in a similar boat where despite them being in a similar game position and probably a better game position than the people we're about to be talking about, I feel like they're also like being set up for a fall down the road where I feel like they're being set up to lose this war against this other side. But still, it was enough to have her here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and this is essentially the same top 3 as last week, and it's just a matter of ordering them. But number 3, I did decide to keep this person number 3 compared to last week, and here we have Rizzo. Now Rizzo does get a lot of big player energy in this episode where early on he takes credit for the MC blindside, talking about how it was a masterclass, it was cinematic, and how he got a potential ally in Sophie S along the way. He gets credit for that. And obviously with Sophie S eventually flipping to their side, like I feel like you could give Rizzo some credit for that. I feel like the show is giving Rizzo credit for that. Even on that, you have talk about how him, Savannah, and Sophie B are being propped up as his final 3, where even though he's not the one to vocalize it, I feel like that's at least something to look out for in the near future there. And beyond that, I feel like the show also gives him a lot of credit for the eventual Alex blindside, where he is the one like planting these seeds in the minds of Jawan and all these other people, saying how like Alex is like playing the middle and how like he can't be trusted. And the fact that the Alex blindside eventually goes through is also pretty good. Not to mention the fact that he also gets through yet another round without having to play his idol, which I think is also somewhat noteworthy there. So again, I feel like there's a lot of good to be had with Rizzo there. I feel like he gets a lot of strategic credit in this episode. I feel like he is definitely like starting to come out as this big player and someone who is aligned with people who have been getting like these strong edits. So I feel like those things are all pretty good and obviously a reason to have Rizzo relatively high. But at the same time, I still do worry that Rizzo will be targeted down the road. There still is this talk about needing to flush his idol. And while like Rizzo is shown being part of this like final 3 group of him, Savannah, and Sophie B, I still feel like Savannah and Sophie B have been shown to be more of this integral relationship showcased on the show, where I feel like we've seen way more of the Savannah and Sophie B relationship over like the Rizzo and Savannah relationship. That also makes me worry that he could be cut down the road there. Not to mention the fact that he does have some hiccups in this edit as well, with him having some rockier episodes. That makes me hard to have him too much higher than the spot, but I still feel like this was probably his best episode of the season up to this point, and it was enough to have him here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and we actually have the same person at number 2 compared to last week, and here we have Sophie B. And again, I feel this was a pretty good recovery for Sophie B, where it's becoming pretty clear that this trio of her, Savannah, and Rizzo are the rooting interests of the season, and they obviously do pull off this pretty impressive blindside to take out Alex there. And at the same time, I feel like Sophie B also gets to articulate how she wants her, Rizzo, and Savannah to be the final 3, and the fact that that line is subtitled makes me think that it is like pretty significant for the season down the road. And we also get plenty of input from her when it comes to things happening around camp, where she talks about how like Sophie S could be pulled into their group and how there is room for 2 Sophies on this island. She also gets to talk about her thoughts on the split vote plan and that she is pretending to go along with it to Christina, only for her to not actually want to go through with it. And again, we do get her perspective on things, and while she's probably like the middle ground between Savannah and Rizzo in terms of overall screen time, she is still like clearly part of this group, and the fact that we got a focus on her relationship with Savannah makes me think that that relationship will be pretty significant on the show. So again, I feel like all those things are pretty good as well, and a major reason why I still have Sophie B relatively high here. But again, I did decide that it just wasn't enough to have her in the number 1 slot, so it's for that reason that I have her here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 49 at this point is still Savannah. And again, I feel like a lot of what I said about Sophie B and Rizzo can also be applied to Savannah here, where she's part of this rootable group, or at least a group that we're meant to be caring for based on the edit. A group that is successful in pulling off this flip to flip over Jawan and Sage to take out Alex. Even beyond that, like there's talk about this solidified final 3 of Rizzo, Savannah, and Sophie B, and the fact that Savannah's part of that is pretty good. And again, like we do get our thoughts on the actual vote here as well, where obviously that's something at least. No, obviously from a game perspective, it does seem like she would have been the primary target had she not won immunity there, where the plan was initially to split the vote onto Rizzo and Savannah, with Savannah also getting like the likes of Jawan and Sage, talking about wanting to target her, which again, I feel like the fact that Ed is focusing on Jawan and Sage's issues with Savannah in particular could be something that props up Savannah above these other people in the sense that it does give like Savannah like these foes to overcome. So I feel like that's pretty good. And even on that, she also gets personal content where she talks more about being a reporter. She ends up telling Sophie B that she was a former reporter when she had told everyone else that she had been working in marketing. And Sophie B gets to react to that, saying that the fact that Savannah like revealed that to her is pretty good. So again, I feel like Savannah has like these little things that give her the edge for me over Rizzo and Sophie B, where she has like these like adversaries that are set up in the show for her to overcome. She has like the credit for being part of this group that is able to pull off this big blind side and a group that we're meant to be caring about on the show. She obviously wins another immunity challenge. That's also pretty good. So again, I feel like Savannah like has like all these like elements that Rizzo and Sophie B also have, but these additional factors, like these overarching story things that give her the edge that make me more confident that she's going to win of this three compared to the others. And it's for that reason that she is still here at number 1. And there we go. That'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week once the season has started, where we'll be getting into these players and seeing just how wrong I am about all these people. So be on the lookout for that. And I'm also going to be covering a whole bunch of shows coming up, including The Amazing Race and Hell's Kitchen, so be on the lookout for that as well. I'm on Patreon and have YouTube memberships. If you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.